A Navy SEAL and his dog stopped on a frozen mountain road during a winter storm. Beneath the falling snow, they found a female police officer trapped in what looked like an accident but wasn't. She had uncovered a truth powerful people wanted buried, and she was never meant to survive that night. What followed would expose corruption, test faith, and change 3 lives forever. If stories of courage, loyalty, and God's quiet miracles still matter to you, stay with us. And consider sharing this story with someone who may need hope today. Snow fell without mercy over the Colorado mountain pass, thick and soundless, swallowing the road, the trees, and every trace of warmth. The night was windless but cruel, the kind of cold that pressed inward, slow and patient, as if time itself had frozen. Daniel Brooks drove with both hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the narrow ribbon of asphalt ahead. He was 38, broad-shouldered, with a frame shaped by years of military conditioning that never quite faded. His jaw was sharp, dark stubble lining it unevenly, more habit than neglect. A thin scar cut through his right eyebrow, pale against weathered skin, a quiet remnant of a roadside explosion overseas that had ended one life and fractured several others. Daniel rarely drove this road unless he had to. Isolation had become a preference, not a burden. He lived alone in a rented cabin miles from town, worked odd mechanical jobs, spoke to few people. Silence made sense to him. People did not. In the passenger seat sat Rex. Rex was a 6-year-old German shepherd, sable-coated thick fur, mottled black, and tan, his ears always alert, even when his body appeared relaxed. His muzzle had begun to gray at the edges, giving him a look older than his years. Rex had once been a working dog, disciplined, focused, trained to read danger before it arrived. He had not forgotten that life, even if Daniel tried to forget his own. Rex lifted his head suddenly. The sound that came from his throat was low at first, a warning rumble, then sharpened into a howl that cut through the sealed cab of the truck. Daniel's foot eased off the gas instantly. He trusted Rex more than road signs or instincts. "What is it?" Daniel muttered, scanning the roadside. Rex rose onto his paws, nose pressed toward the passenger window, body tense. The howl came again, louder, urgent, edged with something Daniel had not heard in years: fear. Daniel slowed, then pulled over onto the snow-packed shoulder. The truck crunched to a stop. For a moment there was only the ticking of cooling metal and the whisper of falling snow. Then Daniel saw it. The guardrail ahead was bent outward, twisted violently as if something heavy had torn through it. Tire tracks cut sharply off the road and disappeared down the slope, half filled with drifting snow. Daniel's chest tightened. He grabbed his flashlight, shoved open the door, and stepped into the cold. The air bit through his jacket, instantly slicing at exposed skin. Rex leapt down beside him, already pulling forward on the leash. They moved carefully toward the broken rail. Daniel knelt, brushed snow aside, and leaned over. Below them, halfway down the embankment, lay a police cruiser on its side. The car was partially buried in snow, the roof crushed inward, the windshield spider-webbed with cracks. Steam or smoke rose faintly from the hood, thin and ghost-like in the darkness. "Jesus," Daniel breathed. He slid down the slope boots, skidding Rex steady beside him. The closer they got, the worse it looked. The driver's side door was crushed. The light bar was shattered, red and blue plastic scattered across the snow like broken glass ornaments. And inside the car, Daniel froze. A woman lay slumped against the steering wheel. She was young, maybe early 30s, her face pale beneath a smear of blood along her temple. Dark brown hair, thick and wavy, had slipped loose from its tie and clung to her cheeks, frozen in places. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder badge, still clipped, but bent. One sleeve was soaked crimson, the blood already stiffening in the cold. This was no simple accident. Daniel could see it instantly, the angle of the impact, the lack of skid marks, the way the cruiser had gone off the road as if guided, not panicked. Training whispered old truths back into his mind, things he had buried. He reached inside, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak, unsteady. "Hey," Daniel said quietly, his voice calm by instinct. "Stay with me." He braced himself and pulled her free, dragging her out onto the snow. Her body was light, too light and limp in a way that made something twist painfully in his chest. She stirred, her eyes fluttered open just once, clear blue, unfocused, but searching. For a second they locked onto Daniel's face. Not fear, not confusion. Relief. Her fingers closed around the fabric of his jacket, clutching hard knuckles white despite the cold. Her lips moved. "Don't. Trust," she whispered, breath rattling. "They tried to—" Her grip tightened, desperate, then slackened as her eyes rolled back. She went still. Daniel swallowed, heart pounding now louder than the wind. "Rex," he said softly. The dog was already there, standing between Daniel and the tree-line, hackles raised. A growl rolled from his chest, deep and sustained, aimed not at the wreck, but at the forest beyond. Daniel followed Rex's gaze. The trees stood dark in unmoving snow, clinging to branches like heavy shrouds. No footprints were visible, no lights, no sound. But the feeling, the one Daniel had learned to obey long before words settled into his bones. They were not alone. Emily surfaced from darkness in fragments. First came sound, the steady electronic beep beside her bed, slow and deliberate, like a clock that refused to hurry. Then the muffled howl of winter wind pressing against glass. Snow scraped softly across the hospital window, a thin, restless whisper that never quite stopped. Her eyes opened, white ceiling, harsh light, the faint smell of antiseptic. Pain arrived a second later, sharp and unavoidable, blooming along her ribs and pulsing behind her right eye. Her body tried to tense, but straps and weight held her in place. A sling cradled her arm. Bandages pulled tight across her shoulder. She was alive. Emily Carter lay still, breathing carefully, assessing damage the way training had taught her. 32 years old, fit, used to pain, used to being awake when she shouldn't be. Her gaze shifted slowly to the side. A man sat beside her bed. He was tall, even seated, broad across the shoulders, his posture forward-leaning as if he'd been ready to stand for hours. His face was roughened by exhaustion, dark stubble along a sharply cut jaw, high cheekbones drawn tight, eyes a muted gray that watched without blinking. There was a thin scar slicing through one eyebrow, old and healed wrong. He didn't look like hospital staff. He didn't look like family. He looked like someone who waited. At his feet lay a German shepherd. The dog was large, solidly built, with a thick sable coat dusted with melting snow that hadn't fully thawed yet. His ears were upright, alert, his body relaxed but coiled, like a spring held back by discipline. His muzzle was graying slightly, the sign of years spent working rather than resting. The dog noticed her eyes open instantly. He rose to a sitting position without a sound. The man followed the movement and looked up. Their eyes met. "You're awake," he said quietly. His voice was low, controlled, carrying no surprise, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Emily swallowed. Her throat was dry, raw. Speaking hurt, but silence felt worse. "Where?" she started. "County hospital," the man answered. "You've been out a few hours." She absorbed that. A few hours meant time had passed without her. Time meant opportunity for others. Her eyes drifted to the door, closed. No uniformed officer outside. No badge. No radio chatter. Wrong. "Anyone else?" she asked. "No," he said. "Just medical staff." Her heart rate spiked, the monitor betraying her calm. Emily closed her eyes briefly, forcing herself to breathe. When she opened them again, the man hadn't moved. Neither had the dog. She studied him more carefully now. He wore a heavy winter jacket, faded, functional. No insignia. His hands were scarred, knuckles thickened, skin roughened by years of use. Not a mechanic, not a desk worker, someone who had carried weight, literal and otherwise. "Why are you here?" she asked. He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. "I didn't leave," he said finally. That wasn't an answer. Emily shifted slightly, pain flaring as she moved. The dog stood instantly, stepping closer to the bed, positioning himself between her and the door without being told. Instinctive, protective. She glanced at him. "Your dog doesn't miss much." A corner of the man's mouth twitched. "Neither do you." That surprised her. Emily's gaze sharpened. She remembered flashes now. Headlights, the steering wheel jerking hard, the sickening moment when control vanished. The guardrail, snow rushing up. Then darkness, and before that, fear. She looked at the man again. "You pulled me out." "Yes." "You could have kept driving." "Yes." The silence stretched. Snow continued to tap at the window. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled past. Life moved on, unaware of the fragile pause inside this room. Emily's voice dropped. "You shouldn't have stopped." He didn't disagree. She watched his eyes at that, searching for regret. There was none. Only something heavier, something settled. The dog lay down again, but his eyes never closed. "What's his name?" she asked. "Rex." She nodded once. He knew. He usually does. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into her bones. She had woken up in worse places. She had faced worse odds. But something about this felt different. She wasn't alone, not in the way she expected to be. Her gaze returned to the man's face. "I don't remember telling you anything," she said carefully. "You didn't," he replied. "Not much." She considered that. Training told her to ask questions, to establish control, to identify variables. But another instinct, older, quieter, told her not to. Instead, she asked the only thing that mattered. "Why didn't you walk away?" The man opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked down at his hands, then at the dog, then back at her. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face, brief but unmistakable. "I don't know," he said. Emily watched him for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if that answer made sense. She leaned back against the pillow, the tension easing slightly from her shoulders. The pain was still there. The danger was still there. But something else had settled into place. When Emily fully woke, she didn't ask who Daniel was, only why he didn't walk away, and Daniel couldn't answer. Yet in that quiet space between them, an invisible thread had already begun to form, binding two strangers together. They left the hospital before dawn. Snow still fell in steady sheets thick enough to soften footsteps and erase tracks within minutes. Daniel moved with quiet certainty through side corridors and service exits, timing their steps between staff rounds. Emily wore borrowed clothes, a gray hoodie pulled low, dark knit cap shadowing her face. She leaned on him more than she liked, but the pain in her ribs insisted on honesty. Rex walked slightly ahead, head low, ears swiveling, reading the world for them. The house Daniel brought them to sat beyond the town limits, tucked among pine trees, bent under the weight of winter. It was small and plain-weathered cedar siding, darkened by years of snow and sun. No porch light, no mailbox. The kind of place people didn't notice unless they were looking for it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and oil. A single-room layout opened into a narrow kitchen, then a bedroom barely separated by a partial wall. Sparse furniture, clean, purposeful. Daniel kept things he needed and nothing else. Emily lowered herself onto the couch, breathing through the pain. Rex settled immediately on the floor between them, his body a quiet barrier, warmth radiating outward. "You live alone," she said, more observation than question. "Yes." She looked around. No photos. Daniel poured water into a kettle, set it on the stove. "I don't keep reminders." That told her enough. When the kettle whistled, Daniel poured tea into two chipped mugs. He handed one to Emily, careful, steady. Their fingers brushed brief accidental, and both noticed. Emily cradled the mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. "They erased it," she said. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her. "Erased what, my case file?" Her voice was flat, but her jaw tightened. "Every digital trace, reports, evidence logs, interviews. It's like I never opened the investigation." Daniel absorbed that, nodding once. "That takes access and intent," Emily added. "Someone inside the system." Silence filled the room, broken only by the wind pressing against the walls. Rex shifted, resting his chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. Emily stared into her mug. "I trusted them," she said quietly. "I trained with some of them, ate with them. When things didn't add up, I told myself I was tired, paranoid." Daniel thought of other places, other uniforms. The same lesson repeated. "Betrayal rarely announces itself," he said. She glanced up at him. "You sound like you've been there." He didn't answer immediately. He crossed to the window, checked the tree line, then drew the curtain an inch. Snow blurred everything beyond the glass into gray and white. "War teaches you patterns," he said finally. "You learn which ones lead to graves." Emily nodded. "I kept going anyway." "Why?" "Because if I didn't," she said, "no one would." That answer settled into him. He recognized it. The compulsion, the cost. Night fell early. The cabin grew quieter, the cold pressing closer, despite the heater's hum. Emily dozed fitfully, waking at the smallest sound. Each time, Rex lifted his head, grounding her back into the room. Later, as the storm intensified, they sat across from each other at the small table. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light between them, leaving the corners in shadow. "I started with seizures," Emily said. "Cash drugs. Then I noticed patterns, same officers, same shifts. Paperwork signed by the same supervisor." Daniel listened without interrupting. "I copied everything," she continued. "Dates, names, locations. I didn't file it. I couldn't. Not yet. Why not? Because the moment I did, she said I'd be dead. Daniel met her gaze. You still might be. She didn't flinch. I know. Outside, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Rex's ears flicked. Daniel rose, checked the door, then returned. Nothing. Just winter reminding them who was in charge. Emily's voice softened. What about you? Daniel sat, fingers interlaced, knuckles pale. I lost people, he said. Good ones. I survived because I was ordered to pull back. Her eyes stayed on him, patient. I didn't want to live with that, he went on. So I left, came here, learned to be quiet. Did it help? He considered. It stopped the noise. Emily studied his hands, the scars, the steadiness, and Rex. A faint smile touched his mouth. He gave me something to protect. Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name-tail thumping once. They fell into a comfortable silence, not empty, but shared, the kind that didn't demand explanations. Later, Emily shifted on the couch, wincing. Daniel brought a blanket, draped it gently over her shoulders. She didn't pull away. Stay, she said, eyes already closing. Just stay. He took the chair beside her and stayed. Rex moved closer, his body warm against Emily's legs, against Daniel's boots. A bridge made of fur and breath and quiet trust. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something steadier took hold, fragile, unspoken, but real. Trust. Emily realized, as sleep finally claimed her, didn't arrive all at once. It formed in the cold between shared silences and honest truths when no one was watching. And Daniel, listening to the wind and the rhythm of her breathing, understood the same thing. Morning came without sunlight. The storm had thinned to a relentless drift, snow moving sideways through the trees as if pushed by something unseen. Daniel loaded the truck in silence, chains of first aid kit, extra fuel, each movement measured, practiced. He didn't ask questions yet. He waited. Emily stood near the door, wrapped in layers that didn't quite hide the stiffness in her posture. Her face had color again, but pain still lived beneath it, quiet and watchful. She looked smaller in the borrowed coat, though the way she held herself, chin-level, shoulders squared, refused fragility. The evidence, she said finally. It's not digital anymore. Daniel glanced at her. You planned for this. She nodded once. I learned early not to trust systems that can be erased. Rex paced between them, nails clicking softly on the floor. The German Shepherd was restless, energy coiled tight as if he sensed the shift from hiding to movement. 6 years old and still sharp, his sable coat bristled every time the wind rattled the windows. Emily followed Daniel outside. The truck engine cut through the cold, a low growl beneath the storm. They drove north away from town, the road narrowing until it became little more than a suggestion carved through white. Where? Daniel asked. An old ranger cabin, Emily said. Miles off-grid. Abandoned after a wildfire years back. No power, no cameras. That's why you chose it. And because no one would think to look there, she added. Except someone who knows how I think. The forest thickened as they climbed. Snow-laden pines leaned close branches, heavy and dark. Rex sat upright between them, ears twitching at every sound. Once he growled low, eyes fixed on the rear-view mirror. Daniel slowed. We're being watched, maybe, Emily said. Or maybe we're remembering how to be afraid. They pulled off the road when the trail narrowed too much for tires. Daniel cut the engine. Silence rushed in vast and heavy. Snow swallowed the truck's heat almost immediately. They moved on foot. The wind picked up, biting at exposed skin. Emily struggled to keep pace, breath shallow. Daniel noticed and adjusted without comment, shortening his stride, offering an arm she didn't refuse. Rex stopped suddenly, nose high, body angled toward the trees. Daniel followed the line of his gaze. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling pressed in, being measured, weighed. "Stay close," Daniel murmured. The cabin emerged from the storm like a ghost-charred beams patched with newer wood windows boarded unevenly. The door hung crooked but held. Daniel checked the perimeter while Emily watched the tree line, hand buried in her pocket where the weight of a small pistol rested. Inside, the air was colder than outside, trapped and stale. Emily crossed to the far wall and pried loose a loose plank behind an old metal shelf. From the hollow, she pulled a weatherproof case scarred and blackened. Daniel exhaled. "You hid it well. I hid it alone," she said. "That was the mistake." The storm worsened by afternoon. Snow fell hard enough to erase the world beyond the cabin walls. They waited it out, conserving heat, listening to the wind batter the roof. Emily broke the silence first. "I'm not good at this part." "At what?" "Letting someone else in," she said. "I've spent my career assuming help comes with conditions." Daniel leaned back against the wall, watching the snow claw at the window. "Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't," she replied. "That's what scares me." She turned to face him, eyes clear, unflinching. "I've always fought alone. It kept me alive. But this time," her voice faltered just once, "this time, I don't know if it will." Rex lay down between them, head on his paws, a steady presence. His breathing was slow, grounding. Daniel crossed the space and sat beside Emily, close enough that she could feel the warmth through layers of fabric. He didn't speak at first. When he did, his voice was quiet. "I made a promise once," he said, "to people I didn't get to save. I've been running from it ever since." She waited. "I won't run now." Emily's hands trembled slightly, whether from cold or something deeper she didn't know. She looked at him, really looked at the scar above his brow, the weariness etched into his face, the resolve beneath it. "You don't owe me anything," she said. Daniel reached out, taking her hand. His grip was firm, steady, not possessive. An anchor, not a chain. "I'm not leaving," he said, "no matter how this ends." For a long moment, the storm was all there was. Then Emily nodded, a small motion that carried more weight than words. It was the first time she allowed herself to believe someone would stay. Night closed in fast, the storm thickening until the cabin felt buried alive. Daniel sensed it before the sound came, pressure in the air, the wrong kind of quiet. Rex lifted his head muscles, going rigid, a low growl vibrating from his chest. The heater clicked off. Outside, snow hissed against the walls, then footsteps, not clumsy, measured, more than one. Daniel reached for the light and killed it. Darkness swallowed the room. He moved Emily back toward the inner wall, one hand steady at her shoulder. She understood immediately, breath-shallow eyes fixed on the door. The knock never came. The door burst inward instead, wood splintering as a boot drove it open. Cold rushed in, with the men four shapes in winter gear, faces hidden by scarves and shadows. Guns came up in practiced arcs. "Hands where we can see them," a voice ordered. The man who stepped forward last didn't hide his face. Captain Mark Hale was tall, broad through the shoulders, his uniform immaculate despite the storm. Mid-40s, square jaw, trimmed beard, shot with gray. His eyes were pale and calm, the kind that never wavered in a crisis. Emily had admired that once, trusted it. Emily Hale said, almost gently, "You made this harder than it needed to be." Her chest tightened. "You did this." Hale glanced at the case on the floor. "You did," he corrected. "You didn't know when to stop." Daniel stepped between them. "She's injured." Hale's gaze flicked to Daniel, assessing. "You're not part of this." "I am now," Daniel said. A gun pressed into his back. Another hand yanked his arms behind him, forcing him to his knees. He didn't fight. Not yet. Rex snarled, teeth bared, stepping forward. Hale raised a hand. "Easy. Shoot the dog and we lose leverage." Emily's heart hammered. "Leave him out of this." Hale's expression softened, false and practiced. "Hand over the evidence. Walk away. Everyone lives." Emily looked at Rex, at Daniel on his knees, blood already seeping where the cuffs cut into his wrists. The case felt heavier than it had any right to. "I can't," she said. One of the men laughed. Hale didn't. Rex moved. The German Shepherd exploded forward in a blur of muscle and teeth, slamming into the nearest attacker. The man went down hard, gun skidding across the floor. A shot cracked the air, deafening in the small space. Rex yelped a sharp, terrible sound and rolled blood blooming through his fur. Emily screamed. Daniel surged against the restraint rage, burning away caution. A second shot tore into the ceiling. Splinters rained down. Hale swore. "End this." Two men dragged Daniel upright, forcing him forward. Hale pressed the muzzle of his gun against Daniel's temple. "Give it to me," Hale said to Emily. "Now." Rex lay on his side, breathing fast, eyes still locked on Emily's tail, twitching weakly. The snow outside glowed faintly through the open door, white and endless. Emily broke. She crossed the room on shaking legs and set the case at Hale's feet. "Let him go," she said, "and the dog." Hale nodded once. Smart. He kicked the case open, scanning the contents. His smile was small, satisfied. "Take them outside," he told his men. "Finish it." A distant sound rolled through the storm, low, at first, then louder. Engines. Hale froze. His head snapped toward the door. What is that? The roar grew layered and unmistakable. Tires on snow, doors slamming, shouts cut through the wind. Federal agents, a voice boomed from the dark. "Drop your weapons!" Chaos erupted. Shots fired into the trees. Men scattered. Hale grabbed the case and bolted, but Daniel lunged, slamming into him. They crashed into the snow, wrestling breath tearing from their lungs. Hale was strong-trained, but Daniel had survived worse. He wrenched the case free and drove a fist into Hale's jaw. The captain went down hard, stunned. Red and blue lights flooded the clearing. Agents swarmed in weapons, raised voices, sharp and controlled. Hale was cuffed, face twisted with fury. Emily collapsed beside Rex, pressing her hands to his wound. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. Rex's breathing steadied, slow, painful, alive. Daniel knelt beside them, one hand on Emily's shoulder, the other resting against Rex's neck, feeling the pulse there strong enough. Snow fell harder, blanketing the blood, trying to erase what had happened. But it couldn't. Dawn arrived quietly, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Snow still clung to the trees, but the storm had loosened its grip. Pale light seeped through the clouds, revealing the clearing around the cabin, tire tracks, footprints, the aftermath of chaos slowly being softened by falling flakes. Federal agents moved with efficient calm. They were not dramatic, not rushed. Jackets marked FBI and DOJ cut dark shapes against the white ground. As evidence bags appeared, radios crackled, and names were written down with deliberate strokes. Emily stood wrapped in a thermal blanket, her face drawn but steady. Her hair had come loose again, dark strands framing a face marked by exhaustion and resolve. She answered questions clearly without embellishment, eyes never leaving Rex. The German shepherd lay on a stretcher nearby, his broad chest rising and falling beneath a thick layer of bandages. His sable coat was matted with dried blood, but his eyes were open, alert, tracking Emily every time she moved. At 6 years old, Rex had known pain before, but this wound had cut deeper, earned rather than accidental. A veterinarian knelt beside him, a compact woman in her 30s with cropped black hair and weathered hands. Dr. Lena Ortiz, field specialist, attached to federal operations in remote regions, worked with practiced efficiency, voice calm and reassuring as she checked vitals. "He's strong," Lena said, meeting Emily's gaze. The bullet passed clean. "He'll walk again." Emily's breath left her in a shaky exhale she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She crossed the short distance and pressed her forehead gently to Rex's. His tail thumped once against the stretcher. Daniel watched from a few steps back. He stood alone near the tree line, arms crossed, shoulders squared against the cold. The morning light revealed lines in his face he hadn't noticed before, creases earned through years of restraint and survival. The scar above his eyebrow caught the sun, pale against skin that had seen too many winters. An agent approached him, a tall man with sharp features and a neatly trimmed beard, early 40s, eyes alert, but not unkind. Special Agent Thomas Reed moved like someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "You're free to go," Reed said, "but I'd appreciate a statement." Daniel nodded. "You'll get it." Reed hesitated, then added, "You saved her life. Both of them." Daniel didn't respond. Praise had never sat well with him. He gave a short nod and watched as Reed walked away. By mid-morning, the scene was cleared. Captain Hale was taken out in cuffs, his immaculate uniform now stained with snow and mud, his expression stripped of authority. The men who followed him were led away one by one. The forest, witness to everything, returned to silence. Emily approached Daniel as the last vehicles pulled out. "It's over," she said. "For them," Daniel replied. She studied his face. "And for you." He looked toward the mountains, where light now spilled freely across the slopes. "I think so." They stood together, neither quite ready to leave the moment. Rex was loaded carefully into a transport vehicle bound for a nearby clinic. Emily watched until the doors closed, then turned back to Daniel. "They found the copies," she said. "The ones I sent out. That's why they came when they did." "You planned ahead," Daniel said. "I learned from you," she replied softly. "You don't wait for help. You prepare for when it fails." News broke quickly. Within days, arrests rippled through the local police department. Suspensions followed, resignations. An investigation expanded beyond the town, uncovering years of buried corruption. Emily's name, once whispered with suspicion, was spoken clearly again, this time with respect. She was reinstated, promoted, offered a transfer to a safer unit. She declined. Daniel returned to the cabin, fixing what the storm had broken. He expected to be alone again, the quiet reclaiming its familiar shape. But one afternoon, a familiar truck pulled into the clearing. Emily stepped out, no uniform this time. Just jeans, boots, and a jacket that fit her like it belonged there. Her posture was lighter, her eyes clearer. "I needed air," she said, "and honesty." He nodded. "You found both." Rex limped toward them from the porch, bandages replaced by a stiff wrap. His gait was uneven but determined. Emily knelt, laughing softly through tears as he pressed his head into her chest. "I'm staying," she said later, when they stood side by side, watching the sun dip low. "Not because you saved me, because you stayed when you didn't have to." Daniel met her gaze. "I don't want to run anymore." She reached for his hand. This time, neither hesitated. Winter still held the mountains, but something had shifted. Trust had taken root where fear once lived. Love, quiet and unassuming, grew from shared nights and earned mornings. As the sky darkened, lights flickered on inside the cabin, warm, steady, real. After the storm, there was light. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder or fire from heaven. Sometimes they arrive quietly, as a stranger who refuses to walk away, as a loyal dog that senses danger before we do, as strength we didn't know we still had. Many believe God only acts through the extraordinary. But in everyday life, God often works through choices: the choice to stay, the choice to protect, the choice to do what is right when no one is watching. In a cold world, compassion is not weakness. It is faith in action. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. And if you believe that no one is placed in our path by accident, please subscribe to this channel and walk with us through more stories like this. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every storm. And may you always recognize the miracle when it stands quietly beside you.